We just do the YouTube thing.
Yeah. So welcome to the April Norfolk Strategic Planning Member Forum. This forum is a public meeting and it'll be live streamed on YouTube as we speak. So if you wish to make a comment or wish to speak, can you please either raise your hand or put a message in the message box, and then the chair will invite you to speak accordingly. Okay, over to you, John.
Okay, thank you. Well, welcome everybody. It's Thursday, the 22nd of April. It's at 2 o'clock. We've got the Norfolk Strategic Planning Member Forum and a nice packed agenda this morning. For those people who haven't joined us before, remember we sit here as all the planning authorities in Norfolk, the county, the 7 districts and the Broads Authority, partly in pursuance of demonstrating we have the duty to cooperate, which is one of the legal tests of having a sound plan. And by cooperating on matters of common interest, not least housing numbers, economic studies, the environment and other matters, for example, 4G, 5G, mobile communications, we ought to be able to have joined up plans without necessarily destroying the ability to have customization where it's needed. So that's by way of introduction. We'll take Nina, I think you're going to take the roll call. Are there any apologies whilst we wait there? I see we haven't got Graham Plant. Is there anyone else?
Just Lana.
Just Lana.
They haven't sent their apology, so they may turn up later. May
or may not come. Good. Okay. Well, the last time we met was back in January, the end of January. We had a virtual meeting on the 25th. The minutes have been circulated. For those that were there, has anybody got any matters of accuracy? We had planned to have a GI RAMS, that's recreational avoidance and mitigation strategy meeting earlier in April. That's now been deferred. So that's a matter that's somewhat different to the minutes. Has anybody else got any other points? I'm going to look in the chat. No, good. Well, in due course, I'll sign those with Nina in that case. Right, now let's get on to the main event, as they say in boxing terms. We've got Robin Price for the Norfolk Surface Water Management Plan. Robin, you're part of Water Resources East, aren't you, really? So, and water is one of the things which exercises not just us, but actually it's commonly used as an objection by objectors who object to either planning applications or local plans and that sort of thing. So we've got to take seriously, because it's not just groundwater. There'll be a lot of groundwater. It's retention of rainwater over the winter and also fluvial as well. So it's not easy. Anyway, you're going to lead us by the nose. You've got a prepared presentation. Nina, are you going to run this, or is Robin going to do it remotely from his beautifully appointed sitting room?
I shall. I'm very happy to share my screen, Nina. But yeah, if you can be my plan B, that'd be fantastic. So yeah. Thank you very much indeed, John. Yeah, I will share my screen and get going. Thank you. Just coming through.
And just while you get this sorted, if anybody wants to make any urgent points as we go along, put it in the chat. And if Robin can see the chat as well, we'll jump in if we need to. So let's make it somewhat interactive if we can. Over to you, Robin.
Thank you very much. Can you see my screen, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, we've got that. Yep. Perfect.
Wonderful. Okay, so thank you very much. Those who haven't met me, many of you may have met me before. I'm Robin Price. I'm the Managing Director of Water Resources East, and very pleased to be here today. And also, I just start by saying, just very, very pleased to have been invited to become a signatory to the Norfolk Strategic Planning Framework, some work that I did with Trevor at the turn of the year. So again, really grateful to be a signatory of that, and hopefully going to give you an update on kind of where we've got to with the Norfolk. It's actually a sustainable water plan, not a surface water plan, which I should talk about in a moment. So as you're aware, as Water Resources East, I showed this slide the last time we met. Essentially, we are one of 5 regional water resources planning groups set up under an Environment Agency, or the Environment Agency National Framework for Water Resources. We cover an area from the South Humber Bank all the way down to the Thames Estuary, and we kind of follow the M1 and the A1 up the centre of the country through Nottinghamshire. Our job is a simple one. Really, if you say it quick, all we have to do is understand the future demand for water for our region. We have to produce a set of options which meet that demand and represent the best value for everyone who has an interest in water. And then we need to put that in a plan which will take us to 2050 and beyond. And we've got to do that by September 2023 will be when we'll publish our final plan. As we are all well aware, the demand for water is driven by three things largely. Firstly, the region's environmental ambition. What is the state? What is the environment, the state of the environment that we all want to get to? You know, what is that natural environment? What's our environmental ambition for our region? We also clearly, the region has an economic ambition. This region wants to grow more food and drink, wants to accommodate more homes, wants to attract and retain more businesses. It wants to contribute to the decarbonisation agenda through the production of hydrogen, which is going to need a lot of water. So, and it clearly has a very strong leisure and tourism and wellbeing agenda, all of which drive future need for water. And of course, all of this has got to be done in the context of a rather volatile, ever increasingly volatile climate. And the options that we are looking to develop start really, you know, think around, you know, water efficiency, the hierarchy of water efficiency. We've all got to be much more efficient in our homes, our businesses, on our farms, on you know, wherever we are in terms of this very precious resource. We are also very interested in the role of nature-based solutions, and that's some of the things I'm going to major on when I talk about the Sustainable Water Management Plan for the county. We do recognise that we're going to need some hard infrastructure, almost certainly potentially desalination plants, reservoirs, pipelines, etc. But also I think there's an opportunity to think around how water is managed and traded. You know, what are the opportunities to share water? What's the regulatory context that we can achieve there? So a big, very simple slide with a couple of boxes, but fiendishly complex behind it, but very exciting. I think I shared with you last time the problem we're trying to solve. You know, there is a problem here. You know, this region currently uses about 2.5 million litres of water per day. 85% is used for public water supply, but a big chunk, 15%, is used for other uses, and that is over half of that is used to irrigate food and then produce the food and drink which has been grown, you know, in our field and on our land in the county. Looking forward, we're going to need somewhere between 531 and 1656 million litres extra water per day, if we are going to meet the future demand from climate change, from sustainability reductions, from the Environment Agency, from Natural England, to accommodate growth, to accommodate the burgeoning, the developing hydrogen economy, and also to accommodate agricultural growth in the region. So this is a serious problem. You know, the conversations from the Environment Agency Chief Executive, Sir James Bevan, a couple of years ago about a jaws of death, you know, he wasn't exaggerating in any way. And our 7-point strategy, excuse me, in terms of what we are doing is starting at the top, thinking around, you know, ways that we can all be as water efficient as we can be. Secondly, a really important one, which is kind of fundamental and really important for the county of Norfolk particularly, and you mentioned it just now, John, this need to store more water within the landscape, and there's a clear link between flood risk management and water resource management. I mean, the stats from last year: the wettest February on record last year, the driest May on record last year. We've just had a very, very unpleasant and very wet winter, particularly, and large swathes of Norfolk were affected. And as I sit here down the road from you, over the road in Cambridgeshire, there are cracks in the field at the end of my garden. You know, we have not had any rain, and there's no rain predicted for a while. So this sawtooth of flood and drought is becoming the norm, and we've got to capture that flood water, stop it from being pumped into the North Sea, hold it in the landscape, and then share it out amongst those that need it. I want to think about how we transfer water.
We're in drought conditions already for agriculture in substantial parts. The spring crops are already looking disastrous.
Right. Okay. So there we are. And yet, 8 weeks ago, we were in a terrible pickle, weren't we, in terms of kind of flood risk? I can't actually see the questions. I can't see the chat. Unfortunately, my screen is filled. So please, just interrupt me if with questions or comments. Thank you very much. Thank you. We've got to think around how we transfer water from areas of surplus to areas of deficit. Really crucially, and again, really crucially for Norfolk, linking land. How land is used has a profound impact on the way that water is managed. So what are the changes we can make in land use that will resonate and provide an impact on water? There are some clear hotspots where here and now there are problems in the Ant Valley, in the River Thurn. Some parts of Norfolk, there are obstruction issues now where there are here and now issues. So it's all very lovely producing a plan for 2050 and beyond, but we have got to sort out some, or work together, collaborate to work on some here and now problems. And I mentioned desalination. I'd mentioned kind of low carbon strategies and net zero. Our model, our kind of independence model, is going well. So as you know, we are an independent, not-for-profit organisation. I think we've now got all local authorities are members of WRE now, which is fantastic, and Norfolk County Council sit on our board and are one of the funding members for our work. And our membership organisation, we've now grown to 100 from 32 years ago to 150 members, 150 organisations, from housing developers to local authorities to IDBs to environmental groups, energy companies, water companies, food producers, to the Royal Horticultural Society and the Jockey Club. So a very diverse group of organisations, and this plan that we are producing is not going to be one that we hire a load of very clever consultants to sit in a room and produce something and then we send it out to you all and say, well, what do you think of our lovely plan? And you write back to us with your feedback. This is a true co-creation exercise. So all of our members will be involved in helping co-create the plan that we are developing. And we're doing this through a big portfolio of projects. And this list has grown since I last spoke to you. We are investing in we are working on a whole raft of projects to understand particularly the scale. What is the best scale to do this integrated water management piece? Is it best to work at individual farm scale, estate scale, catchment scale? That's where the science is, the catchment-based approach. But actually, we are going a long way and getting a lot of traction by working at county scale. And I'm going to spend the rest of my time in a moment just talking about specifically the work we're doing within the county of Norfolk. And then scaling up from that is our future fens, work right the way across the fens, which of course includes part of the county, right the way up to the regional scale. And we've got around £5 million worth of project funding to deliver these projects over the next couple of years. So the Norfolk Sustainable Water Management Plan, which is being developed through a core partnership of Water Resources East, Norfolk County Council, the Nature Conservancy and Anglian Water. And our work is being funded through the Norfolk Strategic Fund as part of COVID recovery. And again, thank you very much for the opportunity to have this funding and to hopefully spend it very wisely. And our focus here through the Sustainable Water Management Plan is on nature-based solutions. So how can we solve nature-based solutions to solve water security issues? And the official definition of nature-based solutions is there for you to read. And water security, the definition there is the provision of an acceptable quantity and quality of water for health, livelihood, ecosystems and production, coupled with an acceptable level of water-related risk. So that's the definition of water security. So what are the water security issues we're working on in the county? And then what is the role of nature-based solutions? Because as we know, nature-based solutions, actually, if you implement them in a targeted way, can actually unlock multiple benefits beyond water security around climate change mitigation and adaptation, biodiversity conservation, human health and well-being, and jobs and social cohesion. And Ninan's got these slides, and I'm sure I'm very happy for these to be shared afterwards, because I won't read every slide out. But focusing on nature-based solutions, for a water security driver can lead to an awful lot more, and all of those things are obvious, and many of those things are faced by the county. And what we're looking here is to form with our expert guide, the expert guidance of the Nature Conservancy, a process, a thing known as a water fund. And water funds, as it says here, are essentially organisations that create and enhance financial governance mechanisms. They unite stakeholders around a common goal to contribute to water security through nature-based solutions and sustainable watershed management. And essentially, they are a tool it's a central kind of governance process which connects upstream providers of water-related ecosystem services, landowners in particular. Who are those landowners? Parishes, organisations, people that control the land, that are providing these upstream services. It connects them with downstream beneficiaries, which will be villages, towns, developments, supermarkets, water companies, power companies, etc. And you have some governance sitting in the middle. And the way the water funds work, essentially, they seek to aggregate a whole load of disparate projects, across a piece of air, a piece of geography, aggregate them, operate at scale, aggregate them into a single investable proposition that incentivize, upstream providers and is funded by downstream beneficiaries. And this model is is not something that we're particularly experimenting on. This has been done. The Nature Conservancy run 41 of these water funds currently around the world, largely in North and South America, a big footprint in Asia and South Africa. And really exciting news is that Norfolk is the first European pilot, is the kind of flagship European pilot. So this process has been used to sort out water security issues in New York, in Bogota, in Quito, and in Cape Town, and now will be used to sort out water security issues in Norfolk, and puts Norfolk on the international map for this type of thinking. The way we're working this, the governance, the initial kind of governance, the governance is evolving. We kind of this project kind of kicked off at the beginning of this year. We've held a number of steering groups at a number of core partnership groups. And we are now starting to kind of form the wider governance, and essentially we have the core partnership group. We have a steering committee with the organisations there, and Trevor Wiggett sits on that steering committee representing the local authorities. We have the Wildlife Trust, the Broads Authority, the Water Management Alliance for IDBs, the Sandringham Estate, Natural England EA, the LEP, CLA NFU, Norfolk ALC, and Norfolk Rivers Trust. So. And that number, there are opportunities for other organisations to join that, but that's the initial group that's met once. We've had one first steering committee meeting. Sitting around the steering group committee is an advisory group. So we held a workshop back in February, 25th of February, where we had about 130 different people and different organisations on a webinar just to launch this programme. So again, no one is missed out. Everyone has a say, and everyone has a role in this really crucial subject of water management in Norfolk. And what are the key questions that we need to answer? Well, we are now working through these. Which of Norfolk's water assets need to be protected, restored and enhanced to deliver these ecosystem services? And ecosystem services are an increase in water availability, a reduction in flood risk, or an improvement in water quality. Which nature-based solutions? Is it woodlands, wetlands, meadows? What are the nature-based solutions that can be deployed here, and where in the county are the optimum places? And then what's the trade-off with those nature-based solutions with demand management and kind of grey infrastructure projects? What are the collective actions? So how do we unite? What are the key areas that would benefit from this collective action approach? And then what are the funding mechanisms? How can we pool funding or jointly mobilise funding? And what are the opportunities for leveraging repayable finance within this? And the key dates moving forward are our grant from Norfolk County Council runs out in September 2022, and what we want to do is get ourselves into a position where we've developed the plan, we know what we're doing, and we are then able to move into an implementation phase in a phase 2 programme. So we'll get all this set up, and I'm delighted we've just appointed a fantastic programme manager, a lady called Julia Beaton, who is currently the flood risk and biodiversity manager for Cambridgeshire County Council, and she's going to be leading this process for us when she starts in 4 weeks' time. And there are obviously some key linkages. I've mentioned one of these already, which is the Future Fens strategy, which again Norfolk County Council are key partners in, where we are looking right the way across the fens from Lincolnshire right the way through into Norfolk to say what are the opportunities to integrate land and water management to provide, through the provision of particularly 2 very large new reservoir systems, one in South Lincolnshire, one somewhere either on the Norfolk or Suffolk borders, Norfolk or Cambridgeshire border, somewhere to the south of Kings Lynn, to the right of the A10 almost certainly. And what are the opportunities to then move water in a different way, grab this floodwater, stop it being pumped into the North Sea? What are the opportunities to combine this with Environment Agency infrastructure assets as per the National Flood and Coastal Erosion Risk Management Strategy that's been published? And then WRE, we are also members of the Norfolk Strategic Flood Alliance, chaired by Lord Richard Dannett, and many of you may be part of that conversation as well. So again, we are linked into this flood risk. How can we turn flooding, reduce the risk of flooding and turn that into a water resources opportunity when, as it hasn't done for a few weeks, it doesn't rain? And just the last piece is then thinking around our environmental destinations. So in terms of thinking around where are we going to invest, where are good places to invest to conserve habitats, restore habitats, or establish new habitats, or perhaps do all 3. And we have a separate grant from WWF and the Coca-Cola Foundation, and a fantastic partnership with an organisation called Biodiversify to look at a process called systematic conservation planning. And we have a webinar next week. This is a sneak preview of the initial outputs of this, which show by at parish scale where are there opportunities to create new habitats to deliver the objectives that this is a very bottom up process. We've had over 1,000 environmental objectives in from stakeholders across the region, and this is a prioritization, and there's some cost information, etc. It's a presentation in itself, but it's showing some really interesting opportunities for the county of Norfolk, and we are engaged with Natural England. We're sitting down with John Jones, I think it's next week or the week after, to understand how this fits into the local nature recovery strategy, which will be a requirement. Every county will be required to produce a local nature recovery strategy. This also starts to think around opportunities from a planning perspective around biodiversity net gain. So how can we take developer offsets, biodiversity offsets, biodiversity credits, and invest them in the right place to deliver real value for the county. Very, very briefly on this, our other project is our Water for Tomorrow project, looking at the Broadland catchment, the Suffolk and Cameo. I mentioned that there are some here and now issues that we need to look at where there are real problems between the environment, particularly the environment and agriculture, public water supply, and we want to test some innovative and holistic water management solutions. And essentially, with our partners, the Rivers Trust and the Environment Agency, and with 2 partners in northern France, we have a project that runs through till March 2023. And essentially what we're looking to do is develop a series of kind of what is the level of monitoring you need to do in a catchment. How do we get real-time information about how much water is available in a particular catchment at a particular point? And then how do we connect all of us that use water and have an interest in water to that real-time information? And then what are the rules to say, okay, well, it has been a really soggy June, crikey. So farmer X, it's your turn. You can now fill your reservoir. Okay, water company Y, you can increase abstraction from that borehole or whatever. So what are the rules? What are the tools? And then what are the rules that we can do? And this is an Interreg project, again, being developed been supported through Norfolk County Council for this. I think this is my last slide. The big picture for the region, centres around, particularly the Fen, centres around kind of Lincolnshire, around the Wash into Norfolk, and then the green arrows are kind of essentially water in to these reservoirs, and the blue arrows are water out. And what we've then got to do is connect all of these small catchment opportunities into these very large infrastructure projects. And we're going to work out then how we fund all of those, which is again another presentation. My contact details are there. John, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. I'd be delighted to take any questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you for that. We went sort of breakneck speed through that. Thank you for that, Robin. I'm getting a bit of feedback, but there we are. Okay, so the first question is, and I'd written the question down, and then bless my soul, if you didn't sort of half cover it, catchments versus counties, because it seems to me that when you talk about water flows regardless of administrative boundaries, and particularly in Norfolk, I'm sure it's elsewhere, there's a watershed. It sort of goes through, I don't know, sort of Dereham through Wissenset, Horning, Toft, all the way down, and the water to the left goes towards Kings Lynn and the Ouse. The stuff to the right eventually ends out at the river in Great Yarmouth. So if we're going to talk about catchments, watersheds, and let's not forget also that rivers act as boundaries. And if we're to have an integrated approach in a catchment, and I think of my own district in South Norfolk, which is bounded by the River Waveney on one side, and on the other side it's Suffolk. Can I just, and I know there's probably a financial reason here because, through the strategic fund, Norfolk's given you some money, but realistically, for the long term, functionally, are counties the right geography here, or should we be thinking more about sort of catchments? And I'm thinking also about the Wash, which is Lincolnshire, Cambridgeshire, and West Norfolk, although I'm sure Richard Blunt will want to say something about that in a moment, because you sit on drainage boards and everything else. So I think there's a philosophical point, although accepting that we need to transport at some stage water between catchments, because I'm sure Cambridgeshire will want our water, but there we are.
And just briefly, John, if I may, I mean these are planning units for, these are not the answer. We've got to produce a regional plan, and that regional plan has got to produce a national picture. Where can we go furthest, fastest? What is the planning unit where we can build strong collaborative partnerships? And we seem to be the catchment partnerships are very strong, but we are getting a lot of strength at county level. But we will work, as you say, functionally, water in, water out. The science says you draw a line around a catchment, and that's the geography to do. So this is going to be slicing a cake up and down, to come up with the right answer.
Yeah. So, but is the level of granularity a functional catchment? I suppose is the exam question.
Yeah. I'll tell you when we keep it. We need to let's finish off these projects. Let's get some of this stuff, and I'll come back to you in a year or so's time with the answer.
Okay, right. Steve Faulkner from Norfolk. You want to ask a question? Over to you.
Well, thanks, Chairman. Thanks, Robin, for the presentation.
And for the Steve, for the benefit of all the new members, and there are quite a few on this call, did you want to explain what your role is at the county? Thank you.
Yeah, we'll do, John. Yeah, I'm Steve Faulkner, Principal Planner and Acting Head of Strategic Planning at Norfolk County Council. And I get involved with NSIPs and nationally significant infrastructure projects, of which reservoirs clearly are one of them. And I was at a meeting recently with the Fen and Water Partnership, and one of your colleagues from WRE was attending also. I'm just interested in the relationship, really, because of that meeting, which is led by Anglian Water, there is quite a priority towards getting a new reservoir, new water resource, as you mentioned in your presentation. I'm just interested in terms of the speed of which that reservoir is needed, which is probably by 2030. What relationship does WRE have with the likes of Anglian Water, where they're the developer? They're going to have to submit a development consent order, DCO, or is what you're doing able to feed into that process and add value, if you like, to that whole search parameters for a new reservoir in that Cambridgeshire, Norfolk area? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So the need for this major infrastructure will come from our regional plan, WRE's regional plan, and then anything that Anglian Water or Essex and Suffolk Water have in the county, anything that the other water companies do in terms of their investment plans will come from our regional plan. So the regional plan has the primacy, and one of the things with this major infrastructure, one of the problems is that this can't be funded through water bills alone. If we just land this at Anglian Water and say, okay, Anglian Water, we need water for public water supply for Norfolk or whatever, we need to reduce abstraction from the Wensum or whatever, over we go, then it's just not going to happen, because with everything else that water companies have to do within the water bill envelope. So what we are looking to do here is try and be very innovative in how we kind of fund and deliver this, and it may well be that it is an Anglian Water that applies to the DCO. It could be a special purpose vehicle. It could be other. We've got to work through in terms of kind of what is the organisation which is actually going to lead, because it probably won't be. This is going to be too big for Anglian Water to do itself, and Cambridge Water will be a beneficiary. Some of that water will point back south to reduce some of the pressure on the chalk stream landscape and accommodate some of the growth in and around Greater Cambridge. It will also provide some resilience for the county of Essex as well. So there are, and what we're trying to do here as WRE is identify all of the potential beneficiaries. What is the right answer in terms of this infrastructure? What's the right place for it? What's the right design for it? And who are the beneficiaries? So back to how much water do we need for agriculture, for the agri-food sector in Norfolk, for the energy sector, for public water supply to accommodate growth, etc. So we're the kind of the glue that fits it all together. Anglian Water sit on our board, and we came from Anglian Water. We were an Anglian Water project to start with, but we are now independent from Anglian. But they sit on our board, and clearly they are a huge, significant water user and a driving force for good on this agenda.
Okay, so let's just deconstruct that a little bit, Robin. There's a demand side, but there has to be a supply side. Now, wearing a separate hat, involved through the district councils nationally and others with the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority. And they're trying to find 2 or 3 long-term nuclear storage places somewhere here in the UK. And their starting point was just to screen the entire UK to find those parts of the country which might even just be possibly geologically suitable for long-term multi-generational nuclear storage. So my question to you, to a certain extent, is: have you done that initial first pass to show where, for the purposes of a reservoir, there might be areas of interest because presumably the underlying soil structure, whether it be porous chalk, aquifers, it's got to be close to a river, presumably. There can't be too steep sides. There must be a number of constraints which we can imagine, but you'll have the list of, because as local planning authorities, I think we probably have to have regard to, well, just at least understanding whether we're likely to be part of this reservoir club or not, and if so, where, and if we are, by how much. So have you done that preliminary pass work?
So the preliminary pass work is done for the South Lincolnshire reservoir, and I think around 80 different potential sites have been screened largely across Lincolnshire and parts of Cambridgeshire. That work has only just started for the Fenland Reservoir, so that's kind of running around 6 months behind. And the key thing we're looking for is clay. Clay bedrock. You just want a really good impermeable layer. Don't put a reservoir above the chalk or whatever. A nice impermeable layer of chalk. So that does start to narrow down, But again, we're trying to be very innovative with this reservoir, and I think around a reservoir system, this doesn't have to look or feel like Alton water or Grafham water or Rutland water. This could be a series of, this is around storage of more water in the landscape. Could be a series of wetlands, smaller reservoirs, some farm irrigation reservoirs, some widening of IDB channels or whatever. There are many ways of doing this. And to answer your question directly, John, absolutely, you will be involved in the design of that reservoir through the Fenland Water Partnership, which Anglian Water are setting up with us. And we already have a South Links Water Partnership and that South Links Water Partnership is helping with the co-design of the reservoir to make sure that it maximises the benefits for the county that it's being placed in.
So when you say the reservoir, you've got a reservoir in mind, or are there
the reservoir system? Apologies, tripped myself up. The reservoir system, John. Yeah.
Well, I think I don't know. I'll speak from the chair. I think it'd be really useful if you did a preliminary pass using some mapping software, if you like, to say, well, where's the clay?
Yeah.
Where's clay that's within 5 miles of a river? Where's clay within 5 miles of a river without too much of a slope on it?
Yeah.
Because presumably they are the candidate sites, and I think it would help us as planning authorities when considering strategic housing market assessments and stuff to have a bit of data on that. Yeah. Anyway, I'm moving on. Alan Gomm's wanting to ask a question. I noticed he stepped out of his room earlier to put on his mustard cord, so he's in full Brexit mode, trying to stop the Bedfordshire people nicking our water. So, well, that's the essence of the question in the chat. Alan, have I got that right, or did I misconstrue?
You have got that one. I don't know if Robin can see the question. Basically, it was.
Let me get it. Yeah.
Have you got it there?
Just getting it. Thank you, Alan. Yeah.
Yeah. For those people who are dialing on the phone, just repeat it, Alan.
Yeah, so we've got the Great Ouse catchment, which goes into some of those huge growth areas in Bedfordshire and Hertfordshire. And the tongue-in-cheek kind of angle of the question is, won't they steal all of our water before it gets to us? But obviously, there will be some relationship with the kind of growth areas in Beds and Herts, and what the impact is downstream into the kind of West Norfolks of this world.
So actually, potentially the water for Norfolk is going to come from Bedfordshire. Is going to come from the Great Ouse. It's all predicated on the Great Ouse and things like the Ouse washes. What are the opportunities around the water there? So in terms of kind of back to my big kind of map of the region. The arc, I view the arc in kind of three chunks. There's the Oxfordshire bit, which is in the water sources southeast part. There's the middle bit, as you say, Northamptonshire, Bedfordshire, and then there's the Cambridge end, if you like. The middle bit, the South Lincolnshire reservoir, is specifically being co-designed with Affinity Water, who are the other water provider for where they provide water for Hertfordshire and that southern end of Bedfordshire, kind of Luton down. So the South Lincolnshire reservoir will point south into that middle section of the arc. The Fenland reservoir is looking like it will point it'll point into Norfolk, it'll point down into Cambridgeshire, and it'll go down into Essex, and that will provide the water for that kind of end section of the arc, the Cambridgeshire end of the arc. The big thing we need to do, of course, the big problem with the grade 2s is it floods an awful lot. So we are engaged with for example, the Bedford to Milton Keynes waterway part. There's talk of a new canal kind of through Bedfordshire with gravel pits either side. What is the way to use that as an enormous big flood storage area, which then maintains the flow through the grade 2s all the way through and guarantees that we've got water coming out to then provide Norfolk and send back down. Our climate change predictions show that the River Grade 2s is probably the most climate change resilient river we have in the region. So it's a good candidate. It's not going to be affected too much by climate change. If anything, the problem is flooding. So there's almost too much water, potentially too much water, and that's what we're trying to do. Take it out from the top end before it flows into the North Sea, and then do something useful with it.
Good. Okay. Is that okay, Alan? Are you happy with that? Yeah. I mean, it's capturing the winter. It's capturing the winter thing, because I think
that's right. There is an integrated approach. I think.
Yeah, and I'm quite pleased, because what Robin's saying is a slight change of tone from when you think you came last time. Robin, I think last time it was all about save water, and water conservation is important, but as my accountant says, you'll never save your way to a profit, and relying on cutting consumption is what we really need to have increases in supply. And I'm sensing the pendulum is swinging towards increasing supply as well as consumption, and that's to be welcomed.
It's a twin track approach. We need to look at all of it. We're going to need to save water and build new infrastructure.
Good. Now, Caroline, you want to come in, so here's your opportunity. Turn your camera on and get your question in.
Hello, right. So I'm just turning everything on and taking my hand down. There we go.
And we've got some new members, so just explain what you're doing at the county, please.
Yeah, I'm a principal planner in minerals and waste at Norfolk County Council. So I was just wondering, and we have raised this as a question with the Fenland project directly, but as you're here today, I'll ask you as well, whether the Ministry of Defence have been involved in your search for potential locations for reservoirs, because there are a number of mineral workings in West Norfolk, and where they are proposed to be restored to open water, the Ministry of Defence has got quite specific requirements to make sure that they don't attract waterfowl. And I was just thinking, you're talking about West Norfolk, Norfolk, Suffolk boundary, sounds like exactly the bird strike area of RAF Marham to me.
Okay, so Caroline, I don't know the answer. I don't know. We, as WRE, haven't engaged directly with the MOD yet. What did the Fenland Water Partnership say? What was the answer when you asked the question there?
We've just raised it in a consultation response to their process, so I haven't actually had a response back on that.
So I don't know the answer to that, but we will have to absolutely, absolutely. And you raise a very interesting point, Caroline, around the kind of mineral workings, extraction workings. What are the opportunities there? If someone has already dug us a lovely hole that we can then incorporate and plumb into our reservoir system, then that's very useful. And I'd like to catch up with you offline just to have a conversation around the opportunities there. I'm in contact with the Minerals and Product Association, kind of the trade body for all of them, to see, is there a map for our entire region of all of the minerals and extraction workings, big holes that we could do something quite useful with, hopefully. So I'll catch up separately with you. It's useful to know what you do, but I'll find out what we're doing with regard to MOD liaison.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Well, last question, I think. Oh, and Caroline, I think you've got the wrong background. This is planning, not children's services. Right.
Yeah, it's the homeschooling situation. That's what it's been left on from. Sorry.
At least we haven't got dogs barking. Right. John Toy. Now, you're a new member, so I haven't spoken to you before. So, John, turn your camera on. Explain what's your name and where you come from, and then you've got a question about power generation.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name's John Toy. I'm the new portfolio holder for planning enforcement at North Norfolk District Council. So pleased to meet you all. I just wanted the question that I've put there is whether there's a consideration for more local strategies as well, because one of the things that's talked about in power generation, because of infrastructure issues and using renewables, we could look at local supplies of energy to particularly sort of villages and small towns. Is there any strategy that's being built around that for the same with water? So
they're I mean, a lot of Norfolk suppliers are quite local, you know, where there's a single bore, you know, a borehole, a groundwater borehole, and it supplies got a water tower and a couple of villages kind of supplied from it. So there are some of that is happening already. Some of that is, you know, there are also then groundwater, you know, abstractions for agriculture as well. So having to look at those in the round with colleagues from the Environment Agency and Natural England in terms of those kind of local solutions and how resilient they are. You know, so are we better to use, you know, larger, more strategic sources and reservoirs to provide rather than individual small sources? So there's a whole mix. I mean, if this was where I'm in Cambridgeshire, all of pretty much the entire county's water comes from two places, Grafham Water and Rutland Water. Norfolk is a real patchwork of local solutions, as well as, you know, the big High and water treatment works, which takes water from the Wensum and supplies Norwich and the surrounds. But it's very interesting again. It'd be if you. John, if you've got Councillor Toy, if you're engaged in kind of energy, there's another conversation I'd like to have, because we are linking up with Hydrogen East and thoughts around kind of water for hydrogen. You know, what are the opportunities, and is there going to be, is it all around Bacton and, you know, around kind of repurposing Bacton and supplying the grid, or is it more local solutions where we want to run buses, or we want to hydro for buses, or for car, whatever it might be, for transportation? What are the opportunities at a village scale? Absolutely. So perhaps we could pick up that conversation if that's a speciality for you. That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I'd be delighted to do that, because I obviously, you know, Norfolk's got some towns, you know, North Norfolk, but with, you know, I actually have, you know, as a ward member, I have 9 parishes. It's all villages, and it often feels that there's a sort of a town centric thing. Yeah. But you know, I can sit here and look out my window and see a small valley that a long part of it, I believe, used to be a water meadow. So it's somewhere that can hold water. So that's what I'm on about, local solutions where we can collect it when there's lots of water around and then use it when we need it. So that's kind of the loose thinking around it.
Yeah. Okay. And the mapping we've done, the systematic conservation plan, is at parish level, so we will be able to pinpoint opportunities at parish scale, which is great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed. So there you go, water everywhere, but not a drop to drink. Well, as we move on, thank you for that, Robin. Like I say, you've been with us before. There's a slide, I detect an evolution of the message, which is really good. I think last time you came to see us, you might have had about 20 logos on there. There now appear to be about 150 logos. So unless you're going to move up to a piece of A3 piece of paper, you know, there we are. Well done to you, and thank you for that. You're right. It's about capturing the winter storage. There's no shortage of water in Norfolk in the winter. The fields this winter I've never seen them as wet, and so if we can just capture half of that, then we'll be home and dry. To mix metaphors. Okay, now moving on. I know you're welcome to stay with us, Robin, but we're now going to move on, if I may, to Neil and Peter from UK Power Networks. And it's interesting because when I finish this job, I think I'm going to go into being a chat show host, because you've got to have these segues, and the segue from hydrogen to energy is a very important one, because if we're going to get into hydrolysis, we're going to need huge amounts of energy, and of course Norfolk particularly has no shortage of electricity. The trouble is it flows through us from the offshore wind turbines to the, you know, into the national grid and away, and you know, it's very difficult to get some of that electricity stopping off. And I think all our development sites almost completely are at capacity, and lack of electricity is candidly all over Norfolk a real brake on economic development. And that's before we start to consider, you know, absorbing huge amounts of electricity for hydrolysis for hydrogen, or even just to charge our cars at night, if that's the way we're going. Anyway, there we are. It's a complicated thing. Peter, I think, well, Neil, are you going to go first, or is Peter? Do you want to say a few words of introduction? This is your first time here, so you've got all the planning authorities, members and officials, and I think we've even got some people from across the border in Suffolk as well. So, you know, we're open-minded.
Goodness, and thank you for inviting us. It's a pleasure. So I will do just a couple of minutes, and then I'll hand over to our expert Peter, who has a short presentation for you. Although we haven't spoken to you in this particular presentation, will be focused on our investment in the short to medium term, and the challenges and opportunities that presents itself. We did speak to a number of not not to the council members, but certainly to officers over the last 6 months about the future, so about low carbon technologies and about sharing our forecasts, our future energy scenarios and what that looks like. And we had some excellent conversations with the sustainability managers, etc., through both the districts and county level in Norfolk to understand where you see Norfolk moving to and our predictions to where we think the uptake of solar and electric vehicles and decarbonisation of heat, etc., will take us. So we are more than welcome to talk to you, this group, about that at some point as well in the future, or indeed take questions on that at the end of the presentation. This presentation is focused at a more, I guess, practical level on what's happening here and now in Norfolk. I guess, Peter, is probably where this presentation will take us, won't it? But I will say no more, and I'll hand over to Peter to take you through the presentation we've put together.
Okay.
Yeah, over to you, Peter. Yeah, good.
Right, just let me see if I can get my screen shared.
Oh, we can see that. Yeah, nice big circles.
Hopefully you can see that. Right. On a very side matter, it just says if my camera happens to get blotted out by something black, it will just be the cat deciding it's time for food.
Okay. Good.
The joys of working from home. So anyway, right, I'll get on with this. So it's a fairly short deck to go through, just trying to give a little bit of an overview of where we sit at the moment with terms of looking at growth of electricity distribution system in the Norfolk area. As I said, my name is Peter Wright. I'm the strategic planning engineer for the Norfolk area. So in fact, I cover kind of, if you like, North Cambridgeshire, Norfolk, and a bit of Suffolk as well. Got a reasonable area to keep me busy. Full screen. Hold on. Right. So, in terms of growth overview, so main areas of focus that we look at is in the area of meeting the needs of the consumers and the network users. So, in that respect, we're looking at identifying reinforcement needs to meet growth in housing, commercial, industrial type areas. There are obviously some strategic programs that have a bearing on that as well, such things, a couple of examples there, things like Oxford Cambridge links and North New Towns. Obviously, as cities and towns expand, that does put pressure on the existing assets that are in the proximity to those areas, both in terms of capacity to supply the developments, and the other item that's listed there is it can also have an effect in driving an increase in requests for circuits and substations to be relocated. Unfortunately, it's not uncommon that we already have some assets in areas where development needs to take place, which quite often then need to be moved, which carries with it its own costs, timescales, and so on. The other aspect is trying to deliver an environmentally sustainable network. So in this area, we're primarily looking at facilitating connection of distributed energy resources. So we're largely talking here about the renewable type structure, wind farms, solar farms. Increasingly nowadays, these are also getting integrated with energy storage facilities as well. And obviously in the matter of the rollouts of electric vehicle charging points. Obviously it's, whilst we don't install charging points ourselves, obviously they need their power supplies, so there is obviously a role that we play there in trying to facilitate the connections thereof. And obviously to work with the key players in those worlds. Looking at the wider picture, so it's not necessarily just domestic charging at home, but wider community facilities. A key aspect here obviously is ensuring that we maintain the network in a safe and resilient manner. So here we're trying to ensure the network resilience as these consumers and energy resources get connected. We have to be careful about how we do it and how we connect things, because obviously we don't want to overstress the system and then end up with power outages, because no one will thank us for that. The other element there obviously is maintaining interfaces with the national grid, which is the main interface points. We have two that affect the Norfolk area, if you like, being one we call Norwich Main, just outside of Norwich itself, and Walpole near King's Lynn. And our network does also interact with other DNOs around the boundaries, most notably Western Power Distribution for the Lincolnshire area. So you look at sort of a bit of a summary of some of the regional development areas that we are currently aware of within the eastern area. By no means a comprehensive picture. Obviously, we've picked out a few highlights there for Norfolk, but as you were saying, from a number of the dots on the map there, that obviously there are significant development areas across the whole area that we service. And one of the perennial challenges, as ever, is the need to balance, if you like, reinforcement investment across the whole area, and trying to support everything is never an easy game to play. So focusing on the Norfolk area, if you like, what we've got here is a little snapshot of a few projects that have been done over recent years. It's been a little bit of a feel for some of the work that has taken place. We've got things like transformer switchgear replacement. So I've got Massingham. We've overlaid 33 cables through the middle of Norwich. Undergrounded some 33 11 kV overhead lines at South Walsham in AOMB schemes, and there's a few other highlights there from some of the development areas that I'm sure the members are well aware of around North Thetford, Snetterton, Attleborough. Looks that are largely in train, shall we say, for. I don't think we've actually hit the ground yet on North Thetford and Snetterton, but I believe the plans are getting quite well advanced now. There's a few sort of facts and figures there. As we said, the Norfolk area, basically it's supplied essentially from the national grid substations at Walpole, which is near King's Lynn, and at Norwich. Round figures, we supply around 450,000 customers. Peak power demand of a winter around 700 megawatts. Currently, at the last count, had about 2 gigawatts of connected generation. Looking a little bit towards the future, you may well be aware, obviously, the UKPN, as all the distribution network operators, are regulated by Ofgem, and we work in kind of regulatory cycles in terms of investments. So our current cycle comes to an end at March 2023. So we are obviously currently in the process of putting together our initial proposals for the next period, which will be April 23 to March 2028. And obviously they will be, our plan for that period will be submitted to Ofgem later this year for their comment. Obviously we are a bit dependent on them, because it's what we can actually do within that next period does depend a lot on the funding that we are granted by the regulator. Obviously, we make the best case we can, but what I'm showing on the map here is, if you like, it's a snap, a kind of a subset of our first pass of reinforcement investment proposals for that next plan period. So it's not a complete list. The slide isn't big enough, and equally, it's our first pass at the moment. You know, you don't have to stress we haven't actually submitted these plans to the regulator yet. So until we've actually submitted them and we get the determination back, we won't know for sure what we will actually be able to do.
Yeah, Peter, can I just jump in? Would you mind? I'm just from the chair, and I'm trying to cross-reference the spots on the map with the legend.
Yeah.
And I'm looking particularly at spot number 5, which is to the west of Norwich, and yet it says new primary substation, northeast Norwich. So the numbers and the spots don't add up.
Well done. Should be northwest.
Okay, right. Okay, so okay.
Yeah, that one. So that's essentially is the area around the food hub and Eastern. We've obviously, yeah. So whether that one will transpire or not, I'm not sure, because I've got a feeling that there's we've actually had someone has recently been looking at some solar generation, large solar generation in that area that may well end up integrating with being a supply for the food hub area as well. So as I say, these are. So yes, you're right. That should be northwest Norwich, not northeast Norwich. So I've got my letters wrong.
Okay, sorry to interrupt. Carry on.
Well, no, I'm just run around quickly. As we're looking at, the main one's looking at there. There's Cringleford, which is sort of southwestern Norwich, near the hospital area. Is somewhere with development going on. Around that area is approaching its capacity. So we're seeing a potential need for reinforcement there. The second one's the Norwich area generally, if you like, is it Norwich a little more generally in terms of 33 kV network. So we've got substations at Strouse and at Thorpe, both of which are approaching their capacity limitations. So in sometime in that next 6-7 year period, we're expecting we'll need some additional capacity in there. So we've got some work ongoing at Attleborough at the moment in terms of replacing some switchgear. And if the development proposals around there come forward, then we'll most likely need some reinforcement down that area. Sprouston, again, is obviously associated developments around that area, around the airport.
So, look, I'm going to, Peter, if I may just jump in then. So,
yeah, sure.
We love looking at maps. So let's just take number 10. Just I'll pick it out at random. So, what's the capital cost of doing a primary transformer replacement? Say, I mean, are you going to get away with a couple of million, or is it a bit more than that?
It would be. It's that sort of ballpark, probably. I think depends to an extent on the scope, because and what the drivers are. If we're replacing just because the transformers are old and worn out, and all we've got to do is the transformers themselves, you're probably in the sort of 1 to 2 million range. Especially if it's a reinforcement scheme, it's quite likely we'll have to replace the switchgear as well, in which case you're probably more like the 2 to 3 million range.
Okay. And then take but to the other extent. I mean, from your previous slide, you mentioned about the northeast Norwich. So Sproston primary reinforcement, spot number 4.
Yeah.
Presumably that's an order of magnitude more, is it? I'm just trying to get a sense for the numbers.
That would be probably a similar sort of state region of numbers, because that's an existing primary substation that's essentially not going to be big enough in the long run. So again, you're talking about replacing transformers and switchgear. Possibly, cost may go up a bit from that, because we may then have to. It depends whether you've then got to also increase capacity of cables that are feeding the site. So there's obviously multiple elements in the supply chain, if you like, and it depends how many of those you've actually got to upgrade.
So taking 1 to 10 in aggregate, then is this a £50 million project, or I mean, I'm again, we're all just trying to feel for the numbers.
We're going to be looking at some rough arithmetic. Yeah, without actually going through and adding them all up, it's probably that sort of order of magnitude, I would think.
Okay, say 40 to 50. Okay.
Yeah, I'll say once we actually get a bit further, once we get towards the end of the year and we've actually get to the point of making our formal submissions to the regulator, obviously going to have potentially have a little bit more information to share with the members then, is when we actually know what schemes we're actually going to be putting forward as part of the plan is going to be the next phase, and then obviously the phase after that is what the regulator actually decides they'll grant us.
But I know I've interrupted, but I'm conscious of time as well, so I'm talking against myself. I can see we've got a couple of more slides to do. Let's do that, and let's go for some questions.
Yeah, that's fine. Next one down here, we're looking at it's basically looking at distributed energy resources and the developments that have been there. Up to about 2016, a lot of what we saw was onshore wind development. Again, overlapping with that, we tend, the solar started to come online, and more recently, we're seeing requests for storage facilities. Obviously, added into that, there's as mentioned earlier, some of the bigger things, the big offshore wind farms we don't actually get involved with because their capacity is such that our network cannot accommodate connections to them. They have to go straight into the national grid. Yes, this graph there just did give you a rough kind of approximate breakdown of what's installed at the moment. So we've got just over 2 gigawatts there. A large chunk of that, as you see, is gas generation, which comes from the power stations at Great Yarmouth and King's Lynn, which are about 800 megawatts between them. Wind sector is a significant chunk of that is the Sheringham Shoal offshore wind farm, which is about 300 megawatts, and the others are a bit more distributed across the area. So yeah, that's me about done, I think. So if there's questions, we will do our best to answer them. Although, as I say, especially in terms of the future plans, we're a little bit restricted at the moment because until we've actually bottomed out what the submission plan for the next price review period will be.
Okay, well, that's Peter. Thank you very much indeed. That was quite insightful. I suppose the first question I'm going to ask from the chair is, and it relates to my opening remarks, we are actually generating quite a lot of electricity, whether it be solar, wind or conventional power stations. But it's of such a scale it goes straight into the grid. And once it goes into the grid, we don't really appear to be able to get it out again. Is that a correct assertion? I know, it's different. It's a different sort of thing, but how can we get? But it's actually holding back some of our economic development sides, which is something I'm sure Richard Blunt will come into in a moment. But
yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one. I know because from the size of those developments, they are of a capacity that we just we can't connect them to our network. It would just, so it's a little, I know exactly what you mean. It does seem a little convoluted, if you like, that you're taking offshore wind from off the north coast of Norfolk, and you've got to send it all the way down to Norwich to the national grid site to then send it back up to Cromer again. On the face of it, it doesn't seem the most how should we say, efficient approach.
Okay, well, there's that.
I'm afraid that's kind of the way where it sits as at the moment.
Yeah.
So that there are some things can be done, but there are some things. One example obviously is we've got the Sheringham Shoal offshore farm, which is one of the early ones, which fortunately was the capacity of that at 300 megawatts. We managed to connect it into our network up around the Sewell area. But that basically took out the output of that takes the entire capacity of the dual circuit 132,000 volt line that was already there. Then obviously some restrictions to connect the other generation into the network. And when you get to the bigger ones that they're talking about, more recently, when you're into the gigawatts, the network that we have just doesn't have the capacity to handle that volume of power.
Yeah.
You could theoretically kind of put some kind of midway station, if you like, but you essentially have to be duplicating the substation equipment that's being put in down at Norwich Main. Our network wouldn't be able to take all of the power, so you'd have to restrict it to just taking a small proportion of it. And it's that cost element is you're having to sort of duplicate all the equipment from the wind farm developer's perspective, no real benefit.
Okay, I've got you. That's useful. Right. Okay, let's go for Richard first from West Norfolk, because the other two guys have been in first.
I don't know whether I misunderstood you, actually. You showed a map earlier of sort of development areas in Norfolk, and I think you'd missed West Norfolk off. I couldn't quite see it. And as we've got about several thousand homes, I think possibly about 10,000 homes being will be developed over the next 20 years within 5 miles of King's Lynn, I couldn't see where you were showing it.
Well, so we not. Let me put my presentation back up.
There is a dirty, great big place at Walpole, Richard. It must be on your doorstep. You can probably see it from your house.
It's within a mile of where I live.
Exactly. Yes.
Yes, but I think that's about the national grid, not the power gen.
Yeah, were you talking about that map or the other one?
Yeah, the other one, the previous one, the one that's quite early.
That one.
No, not that one. Go. Yeah, well, here, regional growth area. Back. Where the one you just had.
He's worse than Anne Aston on the Golden Shot.
Go back. Next slide.
You stop. Right, you've got to remember, there. Richard, there's a delay.
There is no West Norfolk going on that, and we have major develops in West Norfolk. In King's Lynn, we have, I think, within the next 20 years, we'll be doing at least 10,000 homes in that area. Yeah. You're not even showing it as on the map as King's Lynn.
No, well, yeah, okay. There is a gap. I could have put it on there. I mean, I did say this isn't a comprehensive map. We can't show every development area. If I put a dot on the map,
just would like to see some of West Norfolk.
Size, you wouldn't see the map for dots.
But you haven't even got the whole of Norfolk on there.
Neil,
a small part.
Right, I think we've got the point, Richard. So, Neil, is this just for clarity? Is this map sort of where you've got? Is this development for UK power networks rather than just sort of?
Well, it's not even that. It's a subset of our area. So it's a really one from the Wash down to Littlehampton in West Sussex and the whole of London, Kent, Essex. So we have a huge area. So this is what we call our Eastern Power Network, right? Which is covering the area you can see here, which includes obviously Norfolk. Etc. But this is by no means all of our network, and therefore as Peter said, it's just an indication of when we show this to people who live in the east of England, a very few sample of the schemes that we have going on. So indeed we didn't even, I guess, need to have shown this particular slide. We could have gone straight onto the following slide, which is obviously a much zoomed in view of the area in question. But yes, we use this slide when we're talking to anybody who lives in the east of England. But inevitably some areas are not going to be covered. But the point is,
just confirm then that Kings Lynn and West Norfolk is in the Eastern Power Network?
Yep.
Yeah.
It is indeed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, thanks, Richard. I think we've understood the point, but I mean, it's just not. I think Peter said, that they were just full of dots if everywhere was building a house was on there. This is, I suppose, where the big shortage and the big investments are required. But look, I'm going to go to Trevor Wiggett now, and then Steve Faulkner. All right, schoolboy error. You're on silent.
Hi, sorry, I clicked it once and it didn't work. Sorry. Yeah, thanks. I've done some work with Peter and Neil in the past, and I'm going to raise sort of the questions that I've raised with them when we've been trying to do the work on the Norfolk Strategic Planning Framework, and just understand where we are with some of these points again. Firstly, one of the big issues we have in the county is substation capacity, and the big issue around that is sometimes understanding what capacity substations have. So you're going to know what I'm going to say here, but because the problem we have is we have data from you. It's quite tricky to get to, but we can get to it. But the problem we have is that you allow customers to reserve capacity. So sometimes what shows as being available at a substation isn't actually what's available because it's been reserved. And you get your Jim Vasey and his team taking requests for information about what capacity is.
Yeah.
But obviously, this is a planning forum, and when planning happens, we have to plan for things. They don't obviously happen instantly. And we can find that we go back and then find someone's reserved it the next day and find that the capacity is then not available. And it makes this very challenging to make sure that we have capacity for developments, and that substations have the ability to serve the customers it needs to. And quite often we can find out about these things very near to when the developments are actually going to start. And I'm sure you're aware of all the problems we have at Outer Borough, and the issues we had at Snetterton previously is the prime example. And related to Snetterton, the other question I've got is around the funding. Because your map obviously contained lots of projects. It was interesting to hear the sort of values you're putting on them. We've obviously done a lot of work with you as part of the Norfolk Infrastructure Delivery Plan to understand what the costs of these are, and some of the figures were quite different to what I think you might have told us previously. For example, the Attleborough energy supply, we've got on our figures 22 million, whereas you were talking about a couple of million. So it would be interesting to make sure we get those right. But the issue we've obviously got there is how these are going to be funded. And in the past, we've brought this subject up. And I think I've even mentioned about Anglian Water and the approach they've taken recently, where they've introduced what they call a zonal tariff. So for each new connection, a developer pays a new charge for each dwelling that they add to their network. And I understand that in the past that wasn't practical for you to do a sort of per dwelling charge to help fund for these projects. But my understanding is legislations may have moved on a bit since then, and there may be some opportunities to look at that. But so I'd be quite interested to understand your sort of feelings about how these things can be funded, because most of the projects that you sort of mentioned there, we've got as being funded by the LEP, but I'm sure the LEP aren't going to be able to fund all of these projects. So what mechanisms can we put in place to get these funded? And is there any ability for you to now look at potentially sort of per dwelling charges to get this work funded in the future? Thank you.
Goodness, there's a lot of questions there, Trevor. If I take a couple of them and then perhaps offline we can obviously have a far more detailed conversation. So the charging methodology and the regulations haven't changed yet. There is a consultation that Ofgem are running, which is much delayed, but due to give some kind of outcome in the autumn, where they're looking at the boundary of who should pay for what. So as perhaps the members are not aware, there is a current set of rules that the customer who wishes to connect to the network, and whoever the customer is, pays a proportion of the charge. What are called their sole use assets, they pay for all of them. but frequently the reinforcement or the and if those assets are shared perhaps with other existing developments, those are funded partially by the customer who is connecting to the network, but some of the costs are socialised then as well with the rest of the bill payers. In this case, those bill payers who live in the east of England. What Ofgem are looking, and those rules are still the same, I'm afraid, Trevor. But what Ofgem are looking at the moment is whether that boundary should move, whether more of the costs should be socialised amongst bill payers, or whether the majority or the same proportion of the cost should still sit with the customer, the developer, in the case of large developments, whether that is a local authority itself or a house builder, etc. So they've been consulting on it for about 18 months now, and they're due to make a decision, as I say, in about Q3, whether that boundary will move and more of the costs are socialised than they currently are, which would, in theory, for large schemes at least, make it cheaper for the connecting customer in most cases to connect to the network. That's a very high level view on the cost, but I can take you through our charging methodology offline in a bit more detail. In terms of the available capacity, you're absolutely right. Look, we get well over 60,000 inquiries for new connections every year. At any one stage, there are thousands of customers who are in between inquiry, quote, payment, delivery, and as you quite rightly point out, that creates a moving feast about what capacity is available for whom at what time. The regulations under which we work are a first come, first served. So if you apply for that power today and you accept a quotation for that power, that capacity is then reserved for you. And if someone comes along and they're later in time, unless the first person doesn't accept the offer, that capacity is reserved for them. So you're absolutely right. It makes it very difficult. And as you rightly point out, any kind of visualization or map or whatever that we might provide you could easily be out of date, in a very short order. And the only way around that, unfortunately, is to keep constant dialogue with us. So you're aware that I have a team of people, ask the expert team, who will run surgeries and tell you the real-time situation with capacity, and we offer that service free of charge. And for local authority customers, we certainly prioritise those customers to help them. But it is difficult and challenging, and it is constantly moving. I think it shows the health and growth of the economy, doesn't it? And there's so much development going on. But I would urge you, as I know you do, to speak to us as regularly and frequently as you need to help us help you understand the available capacity for various schemes that are going on at any one time that you have. As to funding those, as you will know better than I, there are various models, aren't there? Some local authorities are making use of HIF funding. Some are actually purchasing, as they've done in Bedfordshire recently, the assets themselves, the primary distribution assets, and then of course developers and house builders are the normal vehicle for owning or purchasing the capacity for relevant development. So there's more than one model out there. I think it's fair to say. But yeah, so there were probably many other questions in your that you asked them, but I think those are some of the high level answers. But I'm happy to take anything further offline, or indeed come back and provide a bit more detail on any of those questions to the group if required.
Okay, look, let's take Steve Faulkner. Thank you for that.
If I can just jump in briefly, John. Just the only other one I was just going to say, Trevor, is when you're talking about the costs of things like Attleborough being, a different order of magnitude to the figures I was quoting off the cuff. As I kind of did, allude briefly, it depends on the full chain of assets to feed that site. So, in the case of Attleborough, the cost of upgrading a substation at Attleborough and the cost of upgrading a substation at Sprout, say, or Cringleford or wherever would be more or less the same. The problem with Attleborough is it's 25 kilometres away from the actual source of the power up near Norwich, and we've got to upgrade that network as well, and that's where the extra cost comes in.
Okay, Steve.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to raise a question, really, sort of teasing out a little bit, John, what you were talking about there about the existing network and being able to get some of the benefits of the offshore wind energy power being generated, because we know from National Grid they're putting forward proposals in their network options agreement for a new 400 kV line between Norwich Main and Bramford in Suffolk. And that's going to have a major environmental impact on parts of Norfolk and Suffolk. What opportunities are there for secondary interconnection down that sort of area where a lot of growth is proposed, in Breckland, in parts of Norwich, etc. These are, as John's mentioned, areas of high growth, and we don't seem to be getting any of the benefits of the power being generated offshore. The question, I suppose, is, are you talking to National Grid, given that they're putting forward these proposals on matters to do with secondary interconnection, EV connection points, other decarbonisation options along that route? And I take your point about the Ofgem's regulatory review. Clearly at the moment it's not fit for purpose. Ofgem are looking into it as part of the offshore transmission network review. So I suppose, the question is, are you discussing it with National Grid? Now seems an opportune time to do it, given the proposals for that new 400 kV line.
Okay, right, thanks, Steve. Was that Peter or Neil?
I think I defer to Peter on that one.
Hospital pass.
I can't give you a specific answer to that particular line proposal, but we do interface with National Grid on a regular basis. We have strategic planning meetings with them about 3 times a year. So I'm not aware of the detail of their proposal for that 400 kV line, on its time frame. But all I can really say is we do liaise with National Grid on a regular basis, and we'll obviously look at opportunities to put additional interconnection into the networks, if you like. Although we have had examples, I think somewhere else, these sort of things, anything, especially when you start talking 400 kV, tends to have a very long time frame. And I know we were talking with National Grid years ago about, say, links sort of heading westwards from Bramford and Ipswich. And that one, I think the idea is that there's actually a 132,000 volt line at the moment, which is basically going to be replaced with a 400,000 volt line, and we've put a new substation in, and it works around that way. But they are long-term proposals. But yes, we do interface with National Grid. We'll do what we can on those fronts.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Well, Neil, Peter, thank you very much. I thought Richard Blunt did a fantastic job earlier when he was saying go forward, go back. It was just like the old days on The Golden Shot with Anne Aston, and if you're of a certain age, you'll know what I'm talking about. Sort of left a bit, right a bit. And the point there I'm trying to make is there's a moving target, and I think we've had a good shot at the target of economic growth and housing growth. But the elephant in the room, and Neil, perhaps you could come back on another occasion with Peter, is to better understand how we're going to integrate with electric vehicles, load balancing, because what I've heard today is, there's a bit of a dilemma in the regs, is the developer going to have to pay? But it does seem to be somewhat unfair that a developer who wants to come in and put in a new substation is really for the wider benefit for everyone else to plug in their cars at night when that factory is closed. And I think that is understanding how we're going to balance and arbitrate between solar, wind, our own cars, the Tesla batteries and everything else is almost as much of a change as BT had to take into account when there was the Erlang constant when they put in line plant for a new housing estate in the 70s on the basis that no more than 10 people can be on the phone at any one time, and now everyone's on the interweb. So I think we're probably at an inflection point, and I just wonder whether we could come back on another occasion just to draw out some of those tensions. But for the moment, I think we've got a much better idea of the interplay between UK Power Networks, National Grid. The fact is that we can't really easily get access to the solar and the wind, but hopefully that will change. Guys, thanks very much indeed. Mike, you've turned on your camera. Was that for a reason, or?
Yeah, I want to make a joke. I just
go on.
you look far too young to remember the golden shot. Oh, and I was quite young when that was on. But you also, do you remember Bernie the Bolt?
Bernie the Bolt, yeah, absolutely. Bob Monkhouse and the other bloke who didn't last very long. The thing is, what you've got to remember is, and we're going to go dredge the history now, because I think you could probably remember it, Mike. Remember, Anne Aston did do the Christmas Panto at the Theatre Royal in 1972. It's seared into my memory. Right, okay, guys. Before we all go down too far memory lane, thanks for that. I think we've now probably got to go to the next part of the agenda. Neil, Peter, thank you very much indeed. That was really insightful. Please come back. We had Robin earlier who'd come back for a second bite at the cherry, and I think we'd like to see you guys to draw out some of those other inferences later on. Good. Really pleased. So, right, please stay, or if you have got better things to do, I think we'll fully understand. Neenan, right, my screen's just gone off. What's the next one on the agenda? It's Trevor on the update, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a strategic planning framework update.
Yeah.
By
Trevor, over to you.
Okay, thank you. There's a couple of areas I want to cover today. So we've got some outstanding work of the work programme for the last financial year, just to go over, and I'll do that first. That was sort of the second items within my report that was sent out to the group, but we also need to just talk about the endorsement of the new version of the Norfolk Strategic Planning Framework, and I'll cover that shortly with Mark Ashwell's help. So just to make you aware, I think everyone should know or has been invited to the workshop that we have planned on the 11th of May, where we're going to look at some options for taking the Norfolk Green Infrastructure and recreational impact avoidance and mitigation strategy forward. So I won't go over that in any sort of detail today. We'll cover the detail of that at this workshop there. We're just finishing off the work of the older persons accommodation and support needs study, and we plan to bring that back to the July member forum, where we can present the final report and just go over the findings in a bit more detail, following on from the discussion we had of it back in January. They're really the only outstanding pieces of work, but I just wanted to highlight that the climate change work, we completed the summary document, which was discussed at the December and January member forums, but we've had some requests for the background papers which were produced to support that summary document, which we put forward. So we plan to pull those together into one document and publish that as part of this member forum as well. That's likely to be done at the beginning of May, and once that's out, we'll send it around to the group just for information and for use by individual authorities should they decide to take any sort of climate change actions further. It's like an ideas and suggestions document for any authority that wants to go a bit further than we could at county level. So that's really where we are. We're still trying to pull together the new work programme for this financial year. Very much depends on sort of the outputs of the GI and RAMS work. So we'll feed that in once we've got the outputs from that workshop as well. And hopefully we can report back in the July forum on the new work programme that we plan to take forward from there. So just going back to the endorsement process, in my report, I produced a little table which highlights that 4 authorities have now fully endorsed the new version of the NSPF. But we've had a few, we've got a few outstanding, but North Norfolk had some comments back when they took their document through. And I think Mark wants to talk about a potential change that we'd like to make to the document around the agreement, particularly 23 on the subject. So I'll just hand over to Mark on that one.
Just remind me of the subject matter of number 23.
Number 23 is around water, and in particularly around working with the various different bodies like Anglian Water, Water Resources East on the various different aspects of water.
Okay, well, come on, Mark, and we've got Robin Price here as well.
Yeah, so I don't want to make a great deal of this. So our members were entirely happy to endorse the framework document sort of in its entirety, other than the issue of surface water flooding and related to that drainage. It's an issue which stems from our concern about flood waters getting into the foul sewage network and people not being able to flush their toilets. That's essentially the impact of it on the ground. and our members just felt that an improved agreement, so that's agreement 23, which expressly includes the words "and manages the risks of foul and surface water flooding," would be beneficial, because at the moment that agreement doesn't mention those key words. It doesn't refer to foul drainage and it doesn't refer to flooding, although the document as a piece in its entirety does. You know, we're not critical of the content of the framework overall. There's lots of good material in there about this issue, but the agreement itself, the thing that really matters, is silent on foul drainage and flooding. And I'm hoping that those words that are in the papers there that were circulated are a relatively modest, straightforward sort of addition, more in the line of clarification than a change. And that wording would reflect, I'm sure, everybody's local plan, emerging policies. It's entirely consistent with national guidance. And what the agreement is largely about is us talking to each other. So it doesn't actually obligate anybody to do anything other than just continue to liaise on a sort of active basis in relation to those issues. So I'm hoping it's a relatively modest, targeted sort of amendment to the agreement that you'll all nod your heads and say, yeah, that's absolutely fine. I'm aware there's some concern that people who may have endorsed this already might have to go back to their members and say North Norfolk have made a pig's ear of this and asked for some further changes. I think it's a relatively modest change which could be dealt with without the need for further reference back to individual authorities, but that's a matter for them to determine. So yeah, our members happy to endorse, but subject to that modification being included. And I think that's a decision that the forum will need to make collectively.
Bloody hell. I mean, it's a small change.
Very small change.
With a dirty, great big blank check written against it.
It doesn't require anybody to do anything, John.
Yes, it does. It requires you to manage the risks of foul and surface water flooding. I mean, dear oh dear. That's what the water company does. I'm not underwriting Anglian Water's capital programme. Just saying. I mean, if North Norfolk wish to underwrite Anglian Water's capital programme, that's up for them.
I don't think the agreement is worded in that sort of way. It's saying that we will continue to liaise with each other with the objective of managing that issue. So it's not committing any authority to any expenditure. It's just being clear what the objective of the agreement is. The outcome of the agreement is a better result in relation to surface water drainage and flooding. That's what we're all collectively trying to do through our local plan policies.
I think we know what you're trying to do, but the language is writing a blank check, isn't it? I don't know. What does anyone else say? No one's madly in the chat, but I mean, assuming risk to manage, I don't want to be liable if there's a flood, surface water, or especially foul. You know, at the moment, pretty clear the Water Act puts Anglian Water, Essex Suffolk Water absolutely in the firing line. Robin, I mean, you're the expert on this. You're still sat there. Do you want to take your camera on and just see where the buck stops? It's on it stopping with me.
Yeah, again, I'd have to defer. I'm more on the clean water side of life, Councillor Fuller. So I think Jonathan Glarham would be able to give, at Anglian Water, would be able to give a very, very clear position. This is certainly something that's being discussed at the Norfolk Strategic Flood Alliance, so it could be something that could go in that route. But yeah, I tricky for me to comment in an expert.
Okay. I think we could sleepwalk into a dirty, great big liability here, Mark.
Well,
Mike.
I mean, I think there are a couple of things. First of all, it might be the way that it's worded. You know, the use of the word manages. I mean, it might be that there's something about how it's worded which maybe is creating a responsibility on the part of the districts which wasn't intended, when if it's really just about people talking and keeping and sharing information and making sure that these issues are taken account of. That's the first thing. So maybe it's something to do with drafting. But the second thing is, irrespective of that, I mean, I'm not happy at this stage about taking anything back to cabinet so late in the process. And I have spoken to officer colleagues at City Hall, and they say this isn't something we couldn't make a change under delegated authority. We would have to take it back to cabinet, and I think it might be that other authorities would say the same. So, I mean, I do wonder whether what we could do is say something like that we acknowledge the concerns that are being raised by North Norfolk, and we need to look at how that could be incorporated into future iterations of the document without creating the sorts of concerns that John has raised, because I suspect that's not the intent of the proposal. So I mean, it's not kicking it into the long grass. It's just saying, actually, at this stage, it would be far better, particularly as John has raised some important concerns today, that we actually look at the intent of it and with goodwill agree that we'll try and accommodate the intent within future iterations, and then the process can proceed.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I recognise that, Mike. Certainly not the intent to create the impression of liability falling on anybody who doesn't currently have that liability. So there may well be something sloppy in the wording that I've come up with there. We did have a debate in our authority about whether this was an issue that could be reflected on in the next iteration, the next version. And I did give some sort of reassurance that it's an ongoing process, and probably, there'll be another version, a version 4 of this in relatively short order. We don't want to be in the position of delaying approval of version 3, given that it's timely now in relation to local plan examinations looming. So I think if the collective view is that you want to delay this and look at it again in the next version, I'll just need to take that back to my members and explain that we gave it a good crack. It wasn't something that we could get agreement on across the board, and it'll be dealt with in the next version of the document. That's me surrendering graciously and saying let's deal with it in a pragmatic way, and I'll report back to our members. Okay. But certainly I got the feel from our members it wasn't a make or break concern that would prevent us from endorsing the document in its entirety. So I'll sort it out at our end.
Okay, John, as new boy, I think you've heard what everyone else has said. I mean,
yeah, no, that's fine. No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's and I've heard what Mark said, and obviously Mark and I have had a conversation around it. And the word "and manages," I understand that the concerns about that. I mean, we could, with regard to the risks, but I'm sure that wording can be sorted out in the future.
Yeah, we'll do it on the next iteration. Okay, so Trevor, is there anything else you wanted to say? Back to you.
No, that covers all of my points. We've obviously got the workshop we talked about, so we'll cover off the GI and RAMs then. And hopefully we'll feedback at the next forum on the future work programme.
Good, thanks for that. Right, okay, Cameron, where are you for the next item on the agenda? Neighbourhood Neighbouring Counties update.
Afternoon. For the benefit of anyone who's not seen me before, I'm Cameron Clough. I'm the Senior Planning and Growth Officer from Suffolk County Council. I'm just going to give a quick update on the local plans progress in Suffolk. So starting with Ipswich, they had their examination hearings in November and December last year, and we've now had a letter from the borough, should I say, have had a letter from the inspectors who say it's likely to be found sound with some modifications. Labour and Mid Suffolk, for their joint local plan, they have now submitted to the Secretary of State. They did that at the end of March. West Suffolk are currently so they had an issues and options consultation from October to December last year, and are currently in the process of creating evidence base and taking on board the public comments. And then East Suffolk, they have up-to-date, fully adopted local plans, and so are focusing on implementation and SPDs, with a particular focus on briefs for developers on allocated sites.
Okay, that's it.
Unless there's any questions.
Consider yourself dutifully cooperated with. I think we're done. Thanks for that. Did you have any observations for us, things you've told us what we're doing?
No,
not really. Good, that's fine. Okay, good. In that case, well, we're zipping along now. Let's get on to the next item on the agenda. Thanks for that, Cameron. You're very welcome. Obviously, oh, wait a minute. Oh, no, John, is that legacy hand? John, I think it is. Yeah. Okay. Right. Moving on. So the next one on the agenda is an updated report, which is about sort of progress on local plans. And I'm just struggling with my twin screen. So yeah, who's going to do that? Trevor or Nina? Are you going to lead us by the nose?
Oh no, the local plan update is in the two papers I've circulated. One's on neighbourhood plan, the other one's on the local plan. So would the respective officers from different districts want to give a quick verbal update?
Or by exception?
Yeah.
I mean, should we just take it as read? Paul, you want to come in? You've just put your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I mean, I think I'm happy to leave the document as read in the main. The only thing to pick up, and my apologies if this is my failure, but for South Norfolk, the South Norfolk Village Clusters Housing Allocation Plan doesn't appear to be currently listed. To update the forum, we are intending to hold a Regulation 18 consultation on that in June.
Yeah, so if all goes well, we'll stitch back together with the GNLP, so that'll all come nicely together. Good. Okay. Then there's a little bit about the neighbourhood plans. Looks like I've got 120, of which 30 are in consideration, 60 designated, and 30 are made. So that's quite interesting. Does anybody else want to chip in on some of those? We've just put Porringland through for what it's worth. That's going to go for referendum in June, I think. No, we'll just take that as read then. Happy days. So that's good. So back to the agenda. Date of next forum. We've got a meeting on the 11th of May for the GI RAMs. And Nina, are you going to circulate? That's what we normally do, isn't it?
Yeah, I will. That will be a private closed meeting. So no.
The RAM, the one on the 11th.
Yeah.
And then when you indicating for the next forum? July?
Yeah, sometime around July, that's the date, and we'll have one of our attendants will be Transport East.
Okay, remember that it's going to have to be in person, so the ability, or does it? Are we a decision-making body? So we might be able to meet remotely. It really depends on the regs, but there we are. We'll have to see.
Hopefully.
Okay, so and so we'll get a ruling on that, whether it's in person, presumably at County Hall, or we can do it on Teams. Just depends on how the cookie crumbles. But okay, thanks very much indeed. I think that concludes the meeting, and no one else has put anything else in chat. So we finished 20 minutes early. Let's go enjoy the sunshine. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Well done, Chairman.
Thank you.